Hello and welcome to A Dose of Wellbeing, the Pharmacist Support podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Cochran, the Wellbeing Development Senior Manager here at Pharmacist Support. This podcast is here to talk about all things well-being in pharmacy. And today I'm really excited to have Jay Badenhorst here from the Pharmacists Defence Association to talk about connection and loneliness in the profession. And before we start, I'd like to thank the team at pharmacyshows.co.uk who have sponsored this podcast, enabling us to further our mission to support the well-being of our pharmacy family. So Jay is here to talk about connection and loneliness in the profession. As I mentioned before, he's from the Pharmacists Defence Association, and his varied experience and understanding of the profession through his work at the PDA give him a unique perspective on belonging and isolation in pharmacy, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So, Jay, thank you so much for being with us today on the podcast. There's a lot of talk about how important connection is in creating feelings of well-being and combating loneliness. And in your work at the PDA, I wonder if you see individuals who are impacted by loneliness and isolation and what it's like for them.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a great pleasure. And thanks to Pharmacist Support for all the great work you're doing already. And our partnership with the PDA and Pharmacist Support is a really great platform for us to continue to do with all of this. I've worked in different sectors before, community pharmacy, and most recently within the PDA, sort of across all of the sectors in pharmacy.
Yeah.
But it's given me a real good opportunity to understand some of the pressures facing pharmacists, and also, how does that then go into loneliness and isolation, and how does it affect people? Now, we see a lot in the PDA through our casework. We do quite a lot of casework and potential claims that may arise later on through people. And what we've started seeing is that quite often the environments they work in and under really shape the experiences, and then that can further exacerbate loneliness and also feelings of isolation, not knowing how to then perform, and also then that affects their mental well-being. So this topic is really, really important for us to discuss. And especially people going especially people going through like employment tribunals or even regulatory problems, which they are facing the regulator, financial problems we started seeing as well. Well, not started, but it's always on the rise. And that are really starting to have an influence now on the pharmacist workforce and how they perform within all of the sectors that they are working in. So I guess that's why the PDA is there, of course, to stand with them when they go through these really difficult times, when they feel at times the most lonely. Because there's a big difference between being alone and being lonely, as you know yourself.
Sure.
But also, the way that we tackle it together, Pharmacist Support and PDA, I think is really important that we talk about it. And the moment you start talking about it, I think you raise the awareness and people will go, hey, guess what? I'm not alone feeling this way. And I think just the recognition of that is a great way for us to start making changes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think as soon as you realize that someone else has been going through what you're going through or is currently going through what you're going through, it makes a big difference, especially for some of the scenarios you just talked about, like maybe if you're under investigation or something like that, that could be a really quite scary, lonely and isolating experience. And knowing that there are other people who've been through it and people who are there to support you would make a massive difference.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong. I think people know there are investigations happening and people are going through similar things. But every case that you are going through is unique to you. So there's no other case. There may be some similarities, maybe a wrong diagnosis or dispensing incident or something like that. But actually your case will be unique to you. And quite often people will feel that, it affects only them. And the impact that will have then during that investigation and even afterwards as well could be profound for people. And of course, then you start thinking about the stigma attached to being investigated and actually going through all of these difficult times. People will actually, They will close themselves into, wrap themselves into cocoons and actually get more lonely during those processes. And of course, that then drives isolation, which of course, it's this difficult circle. The more lonely you get and the more isolated you make yourself, the more people think, well, what is the matter with him? And, all of that journey is just not good for someone to be in.
Yeah.
So I mean, the things we see when the settings, so in community pharmacy, there's such a huge amount of workload currently going, and the change is so rapid. Pretty much every week we now see new announcements coming through. So the different settings, and we'll hopefully touch on it a little bit later, are all similar, but all slightly different.
Yeah.
So we've got to really look holistically at how we're going to tackle all of the feelings of isolation and create those connections so that the profession can start thriving again.
Yeah, that's great. And are there any scenarios that you think particularly lead to loneliness or isolation in pharmacists? We've talked about employment or fitness to practice issues. I'm sure those are like massive contributors, partly because of the shame and the stigma that you talked about, but also just the extreme stress. And some people will isolate themselves when they're stressed. That can be one coping mechanism. But I'm sure there are a lot of other scenarios that lead to loneliness and isolation that exist. So I just wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think we need to think about it a little bit further upstream. So once you're in that moment of being investigator or whatever, that really is a difficult time for people, and that will exasperate anything going on in your life. But if you look at the specific settings, for example, community pharmacy, where people work on a huge amount of pressure, people walk in nowadays from the street as a patient, and you want to be seen straight there, because the idea of community pharmacy still being on-demand service is still there. Although you may start setting up appointments and all of those type of things, the expectations of patients are that when I walk in, I want to be seen. When I walk in, my prescription should be ready. It's all of these expectations. So that then drives the feelings of stress and anxiety, because you never really know what you're going to face. And of course, if you if you work there and you've already got minimal staff potentially, or it may be just you and maybe a couple of support teams, again, that will drive all of that fears and anxiety. Pile on top of a load of services to do, and you think, well, gosh, how am I going to meet the patient's expectation, do all the services, but also do the bread and butter, the dispensing, the checking, and carry the big responsibility of managing the pharmacy on that day. So that's really difficult. And then you start thinking about how does it work in a rural pharmacy, for example, or in a small town pharmacy where it may be the only pharmacy within a big sort of area.
Yeah.
The other one that we nowadays start working with, and I also see quite often, are locums. They work in different places all of the time, so they never really have the opportunity to build a meaningful connection with the staff, for example. And I know, having been working in community pharmacy before the PDA for a long time, when I was a pharmacist in a location for a long time, not only do you build a great connection with your team, but also with the patients.
Sure.
They'll pop in. And I always used to say, that you are connected within the community when people will come into the pharmacy and go, I just came to say hello.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, well, what's wrong with you today? It's like, no, nothing. I'm just coming to say hello and see how you are. That's when you realize you've got a great connection within the community. Now, if you're a locum pharmacist, you not really have that opportunity, because you may be traveling from location to location, or maybe work one day a week, so there's very different scenarios that locums will be facing with. And then, of course, that makes it difficult for people in primary care, for example, because quite often nowadays you think you're going to work in primary care in a GP setting, and you're going to have all of these wonderful other healthcare professionals around you, but quite often it's quite lonely, because you may be in your room by yourself, and you may be given tasks to do and doesn't really have the opportunity to interact with your peers. So it's that expectation, again, where people think, I'm going to be part of a multidisciplinary team, but actually, in the end, you are sort of by yourself.
Yeah.
So in primary care, they also feel quite isolated nowadays. And of course, it's new positions that's quite often created. So people in new positions with different workloads, it drives that feeling of isolation. If you're stuck in a room by yourself, you don't really know the people, because you don't really interact with them on a regular basis. It's quite difficult then to build those networks, those peer networks, which are so important for pharmacists.
Absolutely. So we know that there's an issue. How can the PDA help?
So the PDA already... the PDA already has a load of different resources that we are doing. So we employ pharmacists who have a great deal of empathy already with people. And, or the members that ring in, but we also have paralegals, we also have solicitors. We've got a great team that deals with the cases that we are seeing. But I think the PDA not just want to represent and help during the times of difficulty. So we've also had a very, very long-standing partnership with Pharmacist Support, and we've done things in the past, which I'm really grateful for. And I think that benefits the members and also your members. But we're also now starting to do is we've launched our own mental wellbeing strategy for our members, but also internally we are doing changes within the PDA where we are equipping our staff better. And so that when the members ring up, they can actually deal with some of the early triage and actually refer to people, refer to different resources that we are putting into the PDA and that we've had for a long time, but maybe not always utilized. So when PDA members face difficulty, they have almost like a helpline that they can ring for 24/7. Because quite often these things that will come out, the anxieties happen when you're not at work. You'll be thinking afterwards going, oh my goodness. And then
trying to get to sleep at night.
Absolutely. So we've got a 24/7 confidential helpline where people can start a counseling service, and we can triage people to different counseling sessions. So you've got the initial emotional support that you can go for. But then also from there, it will lead into like structured counseling sessions where people will be taken through a structured process with professionals that will help them through that. But also what we're now doing also is the mental health wellbeing training we're putting in place alongside what we already do with you. We've got quite a few things that's going to be available to members. So for example, we've got mental health awareness courses, which will be one-to-one face-to-face meetings where we'll be building up little communities of experts almost on mental wellbeing. And then that will hopefully start spread the message of good wellbeing within pharmacists. We've also got like a self-leadership course that we are going to do called Lead Well, Live Well. So it instills some really good discipline within yourself of how do you look after yourself first in order to look after people better that actually come to you. There's also a wellness network, so of wellness champions basically being set up, and they'll be meeting on a quarterly basis to discuss some of the trends and the issues that they are seeing, and that will help shape us how we actually address some of the common causes that we see within pharmacists, and that will hopefully then have a positive impact on some of the cases we are dealing with. So we really believe the more we deal with things upstream, the better people will be, I guess, coping with that really difficult period of isolation and loneliness when they are standing in front of a regulator, for example, or in front of an employment tribunal or something like that. And of course, we've got I'm going to refer to sort of the union benefits as well, so we can advocate for better working environments and conditions, and all of those things, of course, is there as well. So we'll be continuing to advocate for that during the same process as everything else.
That's great. And I guess something that we as a charity have to offer that really complements a lot of what you've been talking about is our Listening Friends peer support service. So if anybody wanted to reach out to us as a charity, we have some support as well. And the Listening Friends offer a listening ear to people in all sorts of situations. And I think a lot of pharmacists have found that a really nice service to combat loneliness and isolation and increase connection. I just wanted to highlight that we also have a counseling service and can offer funded sessions for people who earn under a certain threshold. And our counselors have a lot of experience working with pharmacists after all of the years we've had this partnership in place. So it might be nice for pharmacists to know that you offer counseling, we offer counseling, and they have a choice of where they go, or maybe they can use these kind of in combination or as follow on to each other.
I always believe a combination of efforts must surely be better for someone having only one route. So absolutely, that's good to know.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm thinking now, coming away from isolation and looking at it from the opposite view, and which to me is connection. That's kind of what we're aiming for, and that's what might prevent isolation. So how do you see connection as combating loneliness, and do you see any ways that pharmacists can try to really build connection into their work lives?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've just returned from a magnificent conference in Copenhagen And there was over 100 countries attending and over 3,000 attendees, all from pharmacy. And that was wonderful to see how people on a large scale and sort of, with language barriers and all sort of things can create connections. So, it's really good. We need to realize that it happens on that level, but I think it happens with an individual level as well. And it's really good for us to explore maybe how an individual who's going through a really difficult time can create those connections. So a few of the ideas that I have, well, first of all, it's about feeling unseen quite often, and also feeling unsupported. That drives these feelings. And I think that if we can reverse that and make people feel that they are there, they exist, and actually they've got a purpose, I think that is when you start creating those connections again. And I think it's really important we look at how we can do that. So, some of the things we look at is little micro moments of connections. And I'm saying a micro moment because it may be a very, very short interval of time. So maybe like, do a checking in the morning. How are you? I'm fine, thanks very much. How was your journey to work? That sort of thing is.
So asking a follow-on question to really bring it beyond that.
Exactly, because you know what it's like. How are you? I'm fine, thank you. And then the conversation moves on, or you put your head down and you start dispensing, or whatever the case might be. So if you follow it on with another question, I think that sometimes people may go, oh, yeah, okay, well, actually, my journey, and then they start talking. I always like to say to people, what made you smile today?
Yeah.
For me, that's a brilliant term. And even just saying that, you just smile. So people will go, great. Oh my gosh, I need to start thinking about this.
Yeah.
The other thing is really good is use people's names. If you know their name, because the moment you acknowledge someone by their name, they feel recognized, and it's almost like you give them permission to be there, and that connection straight away. And eye contact is really important as well. And not just from peers and from, your teams, but also with patients. So for example, what I like to do when I'm seeing patients and I'm still working in pharmacy, quite often you will nowadays see young patients. So children will be coming in with their parents or guardians. What I like to do is to create a connection with a child as well. So I'll quite often say to the mum or the dad or the carer or the guardian is there with them, I'll say, can I speak directly to your child, please? Yeah. Now, that creates a connection with the adult because I'm asking their permission, but also I will then speak to the child and get them engaged in their own healthcare from a young age, make the eye contact, and then you refer back and forth to the parents and also the child to get the best care for that particular case.
That's a great idea.
It's really important that you create. It's really bad if you've got two people in front of you and you don't even speak to the patient, regardless of their age. Now, if the patient is 3 years old, of course that makes a difference.
Sure.
But if they're 12 or 11 or 13, quite often they would like to express themselves about the pain in their knee or something like that. So it's really important acknowledging them, asking their name, and then referring back to the parents and the guardians who are with them. So I think that's really good. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it's the micro moment of thanking people. At the end of the day, do you actually turn around to say, well, thanks, it's been a really difficult day, but thank you for helping and being part of this team, and we actually managed to get through it. So it's those sort of micro moments that, and if the more you do it, it will become normal practice for people to do. So I think that's the one thing. The other thing is it's almost like creating a little ritual of togetherness. So, for example, in the PDA, we've created a social wall for the PDA, and on there we've got a community called Tea Break. So we talk about everything apart from work on tea break. So we'll say, how was your bank holiday, for example? Oh, look at this picture, we've done this, and oh, this was a great holiday moment. And even that sort of thing creates those moments of connection where people can go, I really associate myself, for example, with someone that's been to the same area of the Lake District or that's been abroad somewhere that I can connect with. So that I found it's almost like a virtual huddle. That's really good to actually have as well. So it creates the moment for people to express themselves and be authentic about the experiences they've had. Buddy systems, I think, is really great. So if anyone starts new in work, it's really great to connect them with someone that they may know or they may have knowledge of. And also it creates that sort of one-to-one person. If you want to go somewhere for something or ask a question, I think it's really important to do that. When we are looking at patients, though, I think that connection we have with patients are sometimes completely overlooked. Because for me, if I have a great connection with a patient and a great outcome, if a patient comes to me and go, can you remember 2 weeks ago I saw you, and actually look, I'm better now. And that connection with a patient will drive loyalty, and it will get people to come back to you. And it's incredible how well you will feel as a pharmacist when a patient comes and tell you what a difference you made in their lives. That I think is absolutely crucial. And the only way that you can build connections with patients is to be genuine, be authentic, be interested in what they got to say, their conditions and all of that sort of thing. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
In the digital world, though, I think it's really important to also recognize the likes of, peer networks on WhatsApp and Teams and that sort of thing. And it's using them appropriately as a way to actually get people to talk about something. So, if you have a weekly call, a drop-in session, bring a coffee, have a chat, no agenda on Teams. Yeah. It connects people living and also working from home, cross borders. It's really important to use the technology that we've got.
Yeah, and I do wonder, with you mentioning that, I think we were pretty good during COVID, a lot of places, at setting up things like that, because people were really aware, like, we're all stuck in our houses. We have to create these opportunities for connection. So there would probably be like break times together that were scheduled on Teams, or like coffee and chat times. But I think that what's happened, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. I think what's happened is that people are still largely working from home in a lot of industries, but those practices have dropped away. So do you think that, from what you're saying, it sounds to me like for people who are remote or hybrid working, there would be benefit to continuing those practices rather than letting them drop away because COVID's over?
Absolutely. And if you speak to a lot of people, and you talk about COVID and experience and isolation and all of the things that we had to go through, quite often they will say, in reflection, the COVID period was actually the best time. Why? Because people had to make those connections. They purposely had to form, bubbles in order to share, childcare and that sort of thing. And that forced people to think in a different way. Now, unfortunately, I think we are falling back into the way we used to be, and you forget about those really important connections. I want to maybe move away a little bit from pharmacy and use an example, because I'm a fitness instructor as well.
Yes, I was going to actually ask you a question about that later, so that's okay. Fine. We can go now.
Well, I'll quickly talk about that. We can revisit it again later as well. So one of the best examples that I can do about connections during COVID, which unfortunately has fallen away now, is I was part of 3 instructors that set up a community fitness class. It was a body combat class. Les Mills organized, and the license was granted into community centers. It was something completely new. And we set the class up. It wasn't my idea. It was one of my colleagues' ideas. So she set the class up, and it was incredible to see how people were driven to come to the fitness class, not just because I wanted to get fit, but actually to create those connections, those moments where you feel, you're working out together, and the benefit of movement and creating that connection. Now, if you add music to that, and that moment of, it's almost like euphoric moments that you go, this is incredible. We're working out together. We're creating a connection, not just with each other, but we're reconnecting with ourselves as well, because the music drives you, the fitness and the movement and all of that. And it was really incredible. We went through different stages of that, where we had to reinvent, so people weren't allowed to stand closer than 2 meters. And it was a really big hall, so we managed to get quite a few people in. But the nice thing is that whenever something hit, like a new rule of social isolation, then we would say, right, how are we going to tackle this? And the nice thing to see is that people came back to the class, not just because they wanted to get fit, of course they wanted to, but it's actually about the connection they created with the fitness instructor or the fitness instructors, but also with the other participants.
So it's definitely the connection that's really driving people to get into the fitness program or all kinds of other things. I think we're all definitely seeking connection in our lives, and that makes perfect sense to me. In pharmacy, there are so many different kinds of places that pharmacists work, from community to hospitals, primary care, industry, prisons, the military. I mean, the list really goes on and on. We've got locums, who might be in a very different situation than someone who's employed in one place all the time. So do you see differences in how connection and loneliness impact pharmacists depending on the type of work that they do?
I think we do, but I think the sort of the way that we need to try to address it and how we try to come up with solutions to create a connection is probably more important than looking at the differences of each sector, because everyone will be affected slightly differently. But I think the way we address it, so for example, if we can create a network of pharmacists that are, despite of where they are working in which sector, they can have one single activity that they do together. And I think that may be a way that we can then also address the bridges or create some bridges between all of the different sectors, regardless of whether you're a locum pharmacist working in a community pharmacy every now and then, or whether you're a pharmacist working in a home care setting or in a prison setting or somewhere very specialized. It's the activity that actually creates that connection. And once the people are together, it's all those little micro moments that we spoke about earlier that creates that real meaningful connection for people then to carry on with. So, for example, I know that we've got some walks at some point that we'll be doing with Pharmacist Support, and it's going to be staff, but also for members. So we can explore how we can then create the bridges for people to create those connections through our joint activities.
Absolutely. So these are the well-being walks that we've decided to do together. And what I'm excited about with these well-being walks is that it doesn't really matter what sector you work in. Like, just come. It's an opportunity for us all to get together from the PDA, Pharmacist Support, different places of work, create those connections, get out in nature, talk about anything. Doesn't have to be work related, although it could be, and just create bonds together. And I think that that's going to be really nice. And my hope as well in doing that is that we will have some of these organized walks, but that groups would maybe start organizing their own in different regions all around the country, and really create all kinds of groups, so that if there is someone who's maybe a lone pharmacist at a prison or something like that, they'll have an opportunity to get together with colleagues, or they can just be together and talk about whatever they need to.
Absolutely. And if we can create the opportunity for people to get together and doing an activity that they feel they are connected with, that is the start to the journey. And the moment you get people together, if they've got something in common, that could then just sustain the journey for all of them together. So that may lead to one walk, another walk, and actually next time they may go out for a meal together, or whatever the case may be. But that it's the start of the journey, isn't it? And then it will continue based on how and people feel. And I think that's the main thing. Someone has got to do something in order for this to start. And I think our wellbeing walks is a brilliant way to start, because it's accessible, and if it's all over the countries. I'm saying countries because of all
yes.
If it's all over the countries, then that will have a profound effect on the profession, regardless of where you work, whether it's in a prison or community pharmacy or anything in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to shift a little bit here, and I am wondering about your own personal journey, because my understanding is that you immigrated to the UK. You've been through the OSPAP program. And I wonder how that's been for you, and how did you find your community here in the UK? Did you ever have to combat loneliness as you went through that journey?
That's an interesting question, and I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. So my journey to the UK, almost 25 years ago now, has been incredibly exciting, but also it's probably been one of the most difficult times in my life, especially at the start, because if you come over by yourself and you've got no support around you, you don't know the community, you don't know pharmacy, but you don't know any pharmacists, it does put you into a position which is profoundly difficult. And there were times when I questioned myself, going, why am I here? And it was only my working permit that kept me here, because back in the day I still had a working permit, I was sponsored to be here. And there were times that I found it really, really hard. And for me, my story, and I think being open and honest and showing vulnerability and actually telling your story to some people openly, I think quite often that creates a bridge. It's the stories, I think, that connect people. And once you can say to someone, you know what, I've been there and I know it's difficult, it creates that openness. It creates a safe space for people then to start healing. And I think my story, I'll use this as an example. I went to the BPSA conference in Swansea this year. And I had a load of students in front of me, and I was asked to do one of the keynote sessions. And I spoke about my journey into pharmacy from South Africa all the way to the UK, and what I'm doing now as a director of the PDA. But they didn't listen to me because of who I was there in my position. I think what really resonated with me is afterwards when people came to me and go, I didn't realize you were South African. You came from South Africa 25 years ago, pretty much by yourself with 2 bags of clothes and £100 in your pocket. So once you explained your journey, and also, I was open about the difficulties I faced and the challenges I had to overcome, and how I had to set up my own community of friends. Because, when you come over, you've got people that you know, people that you know that may have been through that, but they were on their own journey. So the way that I dealt with it was to try to get into the local community myself. So I did some amateur dramatics, and I went to the local church and I made some friends there. And so my journey was really a way for people that may go through similar process in OSPAP and actually say, look at me now, 25 years, I'm now telling people about well-being and how they can look after themselves better if they're in a similar situation, or even in a different situation, but still combating loneliness. And it's the moment you open that, when you create a bridge and say, you are not alone, I've been there, that's when the healing starts. And I think that's when people realize that there's support and there's people that can listen. And once you know that is, the story was the bridge. And I think that was really inspiring to me when the students came back to me and go, it's great to know what the PDA does, and all of the factual information I gave them, that was really important as well. But what people came to thank me was actually, I can see the journey that you've been on, and I can see how you've combated the loneliness, and how, for me, that really meant an awful lot. And I speak passionately about that, and you've got to be authentic about it. Don't sugarcoat it. Why? There's no reason to toughen yourself up and pretend it wasn't hard. What's the point? You're just lying to everyone and yourself. You've got to be authentic in your journey. And for me, I think when people open up and they tell their story, I think that's when the connections happen, because people can identify with that, or they can empathize with that. When there's a big difference between looking at someone in a hole and go, oh, I'm really sorry you're in a hole, compared to, actually, I'm going to get in the hole with you, and we're going to get out of this together. The empathy, I think, is really important. You only get that when people truly understand your story, and the only way that you can tell your story is to be your authentic self.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think if you're wanting to connect with people, that's what people need from you. And we do talk about that in our course for leaders. It's called the Embracing a Workplace Wellbeing Culture course. And in that, we talk about how important it is for leaders to be vulnerable, because you can't tell everyone who works for you, it's okay. Tell us what you're struggling with, and make sure you take a break and take care of yourself. When the leader is acting like, a stone statue without having ever struggled, and maybe they work through their breaks. Nobody else is going to feel like they can be vulnerable if they have a leader who just seems invulnerable to all of these things. So I think that's a really great point. I thought it might be interesting to circle back just for a minute on your time, your experience rather, as a fitness instructor. And is there anything else that you've learned from that in terms of creating connections and combating loneliness that might be interesting for pharmacists to know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's first of all, we need to recognize that there are some brilliant pharmacists out there who do loads of different things outside of the normal pharmacy. Yeah. And we've got to really celebrate that, because the diversity is just incredible. For example, at FIP recently, there's a whole group on sports pharmacy. That was just mind-blowing. It was brilliant. So there's loads of different things that people do. And I think we've got to really start celebrating the multifaceted pharmacists that are incredible in what they're doing, and also pharmacists just being brilliant and being a pharmacist. But I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned through my journey as a fitness instructor, and also my experience as a fitness instructor, because remember, even when you're teaching classes, you're learning all the time of how to create that connection with people in the class. Because quite often you will have the most fit people standing in the front that knows the program off by heart, and quite often they are your lifeline. So when you forget the moves, they will tell you what it is. Yeah. And that sometimes really helps, just like a refresh of the memory. Oh yeah, we need to do this now. But throughout the whole process, what I've learned as a fitness instructor is that the way you create the best connection is not just through eye contact, instructing people how to do things and how to scale it up and have more impact and all that. That's really important as well. But you've really got to teach to the back row, because the back row quite often are the people that want to be the most invisible. They may be the ones sneaking into the class right at the end. They may have been the one that actually felt, I don't want to go. It's going to be such a schlep, but actually I'll go. So those are the people sometimes that you've got to make a connection with. And for those people, sometimes just a little bit of eye contact or a nod of the head or raise of the eyebrows or just giving that little bit of recognition going, you're doing great. Sometimes those people who want to be the most invisible will need that connection the most.
Yeah.
And it's really inspiring when you finish your class and you're all really sweaty and everyone else starts walking out, when someone from the back row comes to you and say, do you know what, I really didn't want to come today, but now I'm feeling incredible. That, I think, is the most amazing feeling as any instructor can have.
Yeah.
Now, if we can take that mentality that you teach to the back row into pharmacy, and we look at the people who want to be the most invisible, the most quiet ones, the ones that just don't want to be bothered, those people sometimes are the ones that you need to reach out the most to and go, are you okay?
Yeah.
I think that sort of thing, if we can take that mentality, and that's what I'm trying to do in the PDA as well. So throughout the PDA, whenever I'm in the office or when I'm doing online meetings or any sort of work I'm doing, I'm constantly observing who are the quiet ones.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not in the meeting, but afterwards I'll go to them and go, are you okay? Is there anything that you want to tell me? So I think the mentality of let's teach to the back row as a fitness instructor to make those connections with the people sometimes who need it the most but wouldn't never admit it. If we can take that into pharmacy, and as the pharmacy leaders can start looking at the people who are maybe the quietest, who are just so down with work pressure and stress and anxiety and financial pressures and all of that, I think that will make a huge difference.
Yeah, and what I love about that is that also gives a nod to how important that feeling of making a difference is to the pharmacist, because that provides them an opportunity to really help someone and get the feedback from them that they've done something really important today. They haven't just stood in a room in the back doing work. They've made a which is very important, don't get me wrong, but they've made a human connection where they got that direct feedback that, yeah, you've made a big difference to me today. And I think that's really nourishing as a human being. And so that's great.
And I think telling the stories, and that's what I'm saying, the pharmacists with different experience and different interests, we need to create those networks of people so that we can start learning from each other who are also doing different things. I think that's really important. Yeah,
that's great. So you've had a number of different experiences in your life, immigrating, going through the OSPAP program, being a fitness instructor, being a pharmacist, then working for the PDA. And how would you say your experiences have impacted your work with pharmacists now that you're working at the PDA?
So working at the PDA, I think, is a great opportunity for me to work across all of the sectors you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit scary sometimes thinking that there are 40,000 members, not always looking at me, but looking at the PDA. And of course, I'm part of the PDA and a brilliant team at the PDA to try and lead it for the profession. But I think the way that I'm doing most is to try and get there in, like I was describing earlier, get in the hole with the person and see what it's like for them, and then plan a journey with them of how they get out of that. Now, that in practical terms, that's, getting in a hole, it's sort of a weird description, but actually the scenario that or the things that people are dealing with, try and understand that first before you just go, oh, you should be doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Get to understand the difficulties they're trying to cope with, and then help co-create a solution that fits them rather than just, oh, there's a checklist. Once you're through the checklist, we think you'll be okay. It doesn't really work like that.
Yeah.
And we've got some brilliant team members. Of course, I'm part of the PDA, but there's some other team members who, they're just absolutely incredible at their jobs. And I think it's also recognizing that the people who are leading different networks within the PDA, they're doing incredible jobs day in and day out. To be there in the hole with that person and actually help them get out of it together with the PDA.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a great note to leave it on today. It's been such an inspiring and interesting conversation. And I hope it does inspire our listeners to reach out and make connections with each other, with their patients who come in, just across the board, even join a fitness class and make connections there. So thank you, Jay, for sharing your insights and for being a part of the Pharmacist Support podcast.
No, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. And just to take a moment and actually start thinking about the journey itself was really inspiring to me. And, it's really important for me. I think today was not about advocacy. It was about humanity and actually creating those moments that really last and make people be the best versions of themselves.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we hope that our listeners are feeling inspired to bring about positive changes in their own lives. And if today's podcast has resonated with you, you'll find further well-being information, videos, and online content on our website and on our wellbeing learning platform, which is available to pharmacists, pharmacy students, and trainees for free. For further information on our support services, please click on the How We Can Help link in the podcast description. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you feel you may need support. For more information and resources on the benefits of connection, do check out our website or consider taking our Science Behind Wellbeing workshop for free on our Wellbeing Learning platform to learn more about connection and the science behind many other evidence-based strategies to improve your well-being. We want to continue providing our free and confidential support services and to open up conversations like this to ensure that no one in our pharmacy family faces challenging times alone. As an independent charity, we rely on donations from individuals and organizations across the profession to enable us to do this. So if you're in a position to do so, please consider making a donation today. You can find a QR code in the show's description or at the end of the video. Donations help us to provide our essential services, including our counseling and peer support services, financial assistance, and more. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next podcast.